The Brotherhood of Steel is the most iconic faction in all of Fallout. They are featured, often in a major way, in every Fallout game. And at this point, it's a bit much, isn't it? Look, I know it's kind of heresy to call out the Brotherhood of Steel like this, but let's be real. We've seen them go through the full spectrum of their beliefs, from an isolationist faction who hate outsiders, to a charitable organisation focused around restoring life to the wasteland. They may be a fan favourite, but we've hit a point where the group is retreading more of the same ground rather than being anything new. And so I put it to you that the Brotherhood of Steel shouldn't be in the next Fallout game. Instead, we should have a splinter faction. A splinter faction is not a true part of the group, instead being formed by ex-members who have decided they don't align with the Brotherhood of Steel anymore, and so make their own faction to better reflect their own views. Think the Outcasts from Fallout 3. They're similar to the main Brotherhood, but clearly distinct from the faction as a whole. The faction I created to be a splinter is the Brotherhood of Swords. To learn about this new faction, we must first go back to when they were formed. Back in the year of 2282, construction of the Prydwen began. This giant airship would allow the full might of the Brotherhood to safely travel from Washington DC to Boston in a matter of hours, as opposed to the months the journey could require on foot. While an engineering marvel and an undoubted boon for the power of the Brotherhood of Steel, it was not looked upon favourably by one member of their ranks. A young initiate by the name of Harold had been having doubts about the Brotherhood for quite some time. Their goal was meant to be saving humanity from itself, preventing another apocalypse by removing dangerous technology from those who would use it to cause devastation once more. But they seemed to be the ones hoarding dangerous technology. They stomped around in power armour, disintegrating their foes with laser rifles, and constructing more and more dangerous artefacts from the old world. First it was Liberty Prime, now the Prydwen. What would come next? When it came time for the Prydwen's maiden voyage, Harold spoke his piece, trying to make his brothers and sisters understand the folly of their ways. But his sermon fell on deaf ears. For his protestations and refusal to board the ship, he was stripped of his place within the Brotherhood of Steel, a decision which had been a long time coming. As he was kicked to the wasteland, a shadow of potential doom flew over the skies above, taking those he had once called family to a new land. He bellowed after them as they left, claiming that he will make the journey too, but without the use of such vile technology. It was a trek that would take him several years, as his path was constantly interrupted by dangerous foes and harsh terrain. His refusal to use any advanced technology impeded things a great deal, not only slowing his travel time, but also causing every combat encounter to be an uphill struggle. When he finally arrived in the Commonwealth, it was to discover a Brotherhood destroyed. Their airship was no more, and only a fraction of the soldiers still stood strong, clinging onto what little technology they had left. Despite the devastation, Harold saw an opportunity arise. He sought out the remnants and preached to them about the horrors of technology, telling them to throw down their laser rifles and take up the sword instead, to join him in his mission and rid the wasteland once and for all of the dangerous technology that dooms it time and time again. Unlike his first attempt, this one saw many flock to his side. Tired warriors had a flame lit in their heart once more, determined that their fate would not befall future generations. Harold led his supporters out of Boston and headed southwest, finding their way to New York. The Brotherhood of Swords rejects firearms of all sorts, along with any technology which has the potential to cause mass destruction. Where the Brotherhood of Steel sought to hoard these dangerous items, the Brotherhood of Swords seeks to destroy these same things. By permanently removing all of these dangerous items, they believe they will be able to rebuild society in a way where mass destruction would be impossible. While an admirable goal, their belief is unshakable, and they see anyone who refuses to bend to their will as the enemy. Approach a member of the Brotherhood of Swords with your firearm drawn, and they will present you with only one chance to relinquish the item for destruction. Refuse, and you'll be cut down where you stand. Many a raider has laughed at the offer, their face still locked in glee as it's separated from their body. While the swords themselves may refuse to use firearms, they do not leave themselves defenceless. Every member is a master of martial combat, and a few specialists use the small number of ranged weapons that their organisation allows, namely bows, throwing knives, and the like. Members train zealously, as they know they'll always be fighting a foe with superior firepower. But their belief seems to propel them forwards no matter the odds. Many a warrior proudly displaying bullet holes and laser burns on their skin as a permanent reminder of what they're fighting to stop. Their refusal to use advanced technology is not the only way they differ from their father faction though. Unlike the Brotherhood of Steel, the Swords do not harbour inbuilt ill towards mutants, and will in fact allow them to join their ranks, providing they abide by their way of life. They see super mutants and ghouls not as the enemy, but as victims of technology gone awry. While the majority of the faction is made up from humans, there are the odd ghoul and mutant members starting to make their way into ranks, something which not everyone within the faction is too pleased about. Pre-existing prejudices of some members are yet to have had any real effect though, and all members are able to rest safely in the headquarters of what was once the Met Cloisters. The museum has since been rebuilt by the Swords into an ideal version of how they want life to be. Simple and somewhat medieval, but with everyone inside able to live happily. But one location converted is not enough for their leader, and so warriors are sent out regularly to attempt to tame the rest of the wastes, be it through teaching travellers of their beliefs, or killing those who cling to their advanced weapons. Members of the Brotherhood of Swords are zealots at heart, and will either convert or kill any who do not share their beliefs. That's enough for the organisation as a whole, it's time to take a look at their key members. First we have their leader, Harold. As you already know, he founded the faction, and it is his beliefs that everyone else must follow. He is a towering figure, with muscles strengthened through countless trials. A great warrior, but arguably his greatest strength comes as a leader. He believes in always leading by example, and would never issue an order which he himself wouldn't instantly carry out. He also seems to show a great deal of care to all those within his organisation, seeing each of them as individuals united by a common belief, rather than just as tools to shape the world to his will. While that is what they are doing, it is clear that Harold takes the time to listen to them, and for many is both a true friend and confidant. But his trust and friendship only remain so long as those who speak with him keep in line with his mission. The rules are ultimate for him, and take place over any personal relationship he may have. This is a mindset shared by his second-in-command, Marcus. While not matching anywhere close to the stature of his leader, the same fire burns brightly within Marcus's heart. His primary role within the Swords is to lead the Scouts, those who don't engage the enemy head-on like most members, but instead look for weaknesses from a distance, and pick off lone targets with bow and arrow. Those outside the faction would see the Scouts as sneaks and assassins, but within the Brotherhood of Swords they are essential. It should come as no surprise that individuals who choose to fight with near-medieval equipment often take heavy casualties in wasteland warfare. There's a reason most characters in Fallout want to keep hold of their firearms. The wastes are harsh, more so than ever, and as such the Swords will tend to only engage in fights after the Scouts have signalled they have a strong chance of winning. Without their support, the warriors would simply be gunned down in every fight. While that still does happen occasionally, Marcus does a good job of ensuring that it's a rarity, rather than a regular occurrence. While Marcus is a member who shares Harold's beliefs as strongly as the leader himself, there are some within the group who only parrot the gospel in order to stay alive. One such individual is Ector, an old man who was once with the Brotherhood of Steel themselves. He had been proud of his role as a knight back in the day, and even kept fighting after the Pribon was destroyed and the faction as a whole seemed doomed. But despite his dedication, it was clear that things had ended. There was no restoring things to the way that they had been, and he was growing older and slower. He hadn't fallen in battle at a young age like so many of his comrades, and when Harold told him to throw down his rifle and join this new brotherhood, he reluctantly agreed. He had hoped to be able to convince Harold to lead the remaining members back to the Citadel and start reforming the Order, but this idea was quickly shut down. Harold was not a man to change his mind, and Ector was left with a choice to agree with the leader or be viewed as an enemy and eliminated. And so he stayed with the Swords, closer to a prisoner than a true member. He knows that the Swords don't have a chance for prolonged survival. You need every advantage you can get in the wastes, but for now, he will sit back and watch events unfold, hoping for the opportunity to return to DC and to the Brotherhood he prayed still existed. Not every member is as conflicted as Ector. One who is more than happy with the way things are is Galahad, the first super mutant to join up with the Brotherhood of Swords. He encountered Harold while fighting a Deathclaw, and the pair both happily carved it to pieces with their swords. The human questioned him as to whether or not he had any advanced technology on him. When the question wasn't understood, it was then dumbed down several times until the mutant was able to offer the satisfactory reply of, "Shooties be dumb." Even in terms of super mutants, Galahad is somewhat simple. He was never able to master any weapons more complicated than a sword or an axe, and as such decided that anything more advanced was stupid and bad. In fact, he hadn't even been able to come up with a name for himself, and it was Harold that gave him the name of Galahad, one far more regal than the mutant likely would have chosen for himself, but nonetheless, it stuck. After having been shunned from every other group the Wasteland had to offer, Galahad found himself a welcome member within the Brotherhood of Swords, for the most part at least. Harold was joyous to have a mutant to show off as an example of how their goals go beyond just furthering themselves, but could also help everyone in the Wastes. Plenty of original Brotherhood members were unhappy with this idea, but between the might of both Harold and Galahad, it was clear that disagreement would result in a painful death. I think that's enough of talking about the overall lore of this new faction. Let's get down to the important information now of how they integrate into the game itself. I would have them feature as a potential choice for main faction you can side with for the main story. However, joining them would not be all that straightforward. If you haven't already clocked, this faction is basically medieval and see any more advanced tech as pure evil. When you approach them, if you are wielding a modern or futuristic seeming weapon, wearing power armour, or have a robotic companion with you, then they will give you only one chance to relinquish these items for disposal. Refuse to do so and they become your enemy, and will hunt you down until you wipe them out. But if you agree to their demands, you will lose any tech you have on you, and then be taken to Harold to see if you're worthy of joining their ranks. And when I say tech, that does include the potential robot companion you could have with you. Sure, this Brotherhood is chill with ghouls and mutants, but robots are still getting the raw end of the deal, and will destroy your companion if you go with them. But if you want to join them, then that's just the potential price you have to pay. Once in front of Harold, he would then question your beliefs, and bring up one important factor: your Pip-Boy. After some examination, it would be determined that the only way to remove it would be to amputate the arm. However, that would make you far less valuable as a warrior, and so you would need to choose carefully. Have your arm amputated by this technophobe faction, or try and convince them that this technology is a cruel affliction you have to live with. Go with the former, and you die. That's right, I'm including a dialogue game over, where your arm gets infected and the fever wipes you out due to the lack of advanced medical attention. But if you convince them that you're unwilling to have this technology on your person, then Harold will take pity and allow you to join them, under the agreement that you never again wield advanced technology. This would make their campaign path likely the hardest of them all. Melee builds could potentially get by, and those who wish to go for bows and crossbows could have fun, but it's going to be a real challenge to put the swords in charge of New York. Still, I'd want it as a possibility, as I feel this would make a great role-playing run that would significantly feel different to all the others, as quests would relate to destroying any technology you come across, and the elimination or conversion of the other factions. Spoilers, but very few would be willing to convert, so be prepared for a lot of killing. The bloodshed may be worth it though, as the Brotherhood of Swords would have the strongest melee weapons in the game available to them, a fair few of which I'd want as quest rewards, but some could be gathered too by killing the key members. So let's talk a little about them as an opposing faction, before we get to their gear. So you could simply wipe them out. Don't agree to their demands, use your superior technology to get one over on them, and wipe the faction away. Plenty of the members are strong, so you'd need to be smart about taking them out, but you'd almost certainly have range superiority, so they shouldn't be the greatest challenge. But if you don't want to play as a combat-heavy character, then I'd want to have a way to destroy them from within. To initiate this, you'd need to infiltrate their ranks and then speak with Ector. He still believes in the Brotherhood of old, and with a little persuasion, would be willing to lead a coup, manage to sneak in weapons to the Met Cloister or provide support with a different gang from outside, and you can tip the battle in favour for Ector, having him launch a surprise attack which cripples the swords. He would then leave the city with those loyal to him, heading back to DC in the hopes of reuniting with the main Brotherhood of Steel, and informing them of what took place. Be it through betraying them, all-out war, or joining their ranks, there would be plenty of unique items I'd want tied to this faction. On top of their own personalised variants of weapons and armour, which would be slightly stronger than base models and bear their insignia, they would also be the only group to have shields. This would help to make melee builds a little more defensive when playing, and no shield would be stronger than Harold's own. This item could either be looted off his corpse, or given as an endgame reward by him, and would completely prevent you from taking any harm from attacks which hit it. Additionally, Harold would have a sword, which he wouldn't be willing to give away, but would be lootable from his corpse. This mighty blade would ignore all resistances, making it deal damage directly to health. Perfect for taking down heavily armoured foes or abominations of the wasteland. Galahad would also have a sword, albeit one far more crude. It could be obtained from his inventory, or even tricked away from him for a lengthy set of dialogue checks to outsmart him, and get him to trade it away for a far weaker melee weapon. Once you get it, you see that it deals a bonus 10% bleeding damage. The harder you hit your enemy, the more they bleed, so high strength builds would make this weapon deadly. I'd also want a couple of ranged uniques, and these would come about through helping Marcus with some missions. His own bow may have something akin to the instigating effect, which we are already familiar with, but maybe he could also reward you with a crossbow that does increased crippling damage, making it work in a similar way to the dart gun from Fallout 3. There's a whole host of different options when it comes to unique weapons and armour with this faction, but I fear I may have overindulged here, so I think it's time to wrap things up. This is just one of many factions I've created for my own Fallout game idea. If you haven't already, then do check out this video where I go over what I would want this game to be like, and if you enjoyed this style of video, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, as there will be plenty more like it coming in the future. Faction videos will probably make up the majority of the series, as I feel they're a real integral part to the games, and are an easy way to flesh out an idea of the world as a whole. As always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.